We often think of iron as something grand. Railways, empires, swords and steel, but iron also lived quietly with us. Inside the home.it was there before breakfast. It held the roof, cooked the food, closed the doors. It wasn't decorated or polished. It was cast, wrought, hinged. It clanged, creaked, steamed, and simmered. Iron was the heartbeat of ordinary life, hidden in hinges and handles, kettles and keys. Tonight, we don't go to the battlefield. We go to the kitchen, the first domestic. Iron in ancient times, metal was expensive. Bronze cookware was rare. But when iron became more common, it slipped into homes by necessity. In ancient China, small iron stoves and tripods held pots over flame. In Rome, iron pans were used in taverns and large kitchens. In medieval Europe, blacksmiths shaped iron cauldrons, trivets, and spits for roasting. The hearth was the center of the home, and where there was fire, there was iron. The cast iron revolution in the 18th and 19th centuries. With casting technology improving, iron goods for the home multiplied. Cast iron could be poured into molds, cheap, durable, and endlessly shaped. Soon, homes across Britain, America, and Europe featured cast iron stoves, replacing open hearths cookware, skillets, Dutch ovens, kettles, furnaces, and grates, iron bathtubs with enamel coatings, door knockers, lantern hooks, fireplace tools. A single household might have over 24 iron items, never celebrated, rarely noticed, but always used. The rise of iron furnishings. Iron didn't stop at cooking. By the mid-1800s, decorative wrought iron made its way into bed frames, twisted and scrolled chairs and tables, especially garden furniture, gates and fences, protecting the domestic boundary, curtain rods, mirror frames, shelves. Wrought iron could be delicate or strong, shaped with artistic flourishes, or kept plain and practical. And unlike wood, it didn't burn. Unlike glass, it didn't break. Iron had a way of outlasting the home itself. Iron in laundry. Before washing machines, laundry was labor, and iron helped. Ironically, in the final step, enter the flat iron. Solid cast iron, heated on a stove, used to press clothes smooth, especially collars and sleeves, often sold in pairs, so one could heat while the other was in use. Heavy, sometimes up to 10 pounds later, coal-heated irons and eventually electric irons replaced the original. But the name stuck. Even now, to iron your clothes is to recall the metal that made them crisp. Locks, keys, and security doors close because of iron. And they stay closed because of it too. For centuries, iron was the material of security. Locks, shaped by locksmiths with patient hammers, keys, often unique to a single door or chest, latches, bolts, and hasps for barns, gates, and cupboards in rural homes. A single iron key might be passed down for generations. It wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of place, property, and privacy. And even in cities, the familiar click of an iron latch was the last sound before sleep. Iron in heating and plumbing. Before electricity and plastic, many basic home systems ran on or through iron. Radiators were cast in ornate shapes, distributing heat from coal boilers. Pipes for water and gas were made of iron, threaded and joined under floors. Fire grates allowed controlled burning in living rooms. Chimney pots, often made of cast iron, directed smoke safely away. These weren't temporary solutions. Many still exist, especially in older buildings. They rust slowly. They hum quietly. They last. Toys and tools. Even childhood met iron. Toy soldiers, cast in iron. Miniature stoves, scaled down for play. Iron hoops and wheel toys, rolled through streets by children with sticks. Meanwhile, in the shed or workshop, hammers, nails, hinges, saws, spades, rakes, axes. The home wasn't just a place of rest. It was a place of work, and iron was often the thing in your hand when something needed to be built, fixed, or finished. Cooking with iron. Cast iron cookware has never gone out of style. Why? It heats evenly, it lasts forever, it improves with use. It can go from stovetop to oven to campfire. Families pass down skillets like heirlooms. The more seasoned the pan, the better the food. Even now, chefs swear by it. Even now, new pans are sold in the same shape they were 100 years ago. Iron may not be fast, but it is faithful. The patina of use. Unlike stainless steel or aluminum, iron shows its age. It rusts, it blackens, it wears at the corners, but people learn to love this to recognize the quiet beauty in patina, a fireplace tool worn smooth by decades of hands, a skillet darkened by thousands of meals, a garden gate that creaks, not from damage, but from memory. Iron in the home became part of the family. It absorbed time. I in the corner of the room sometimes. The only iron in a home was invisible. The nails in the floor, the brackets in the wall, the weight inside the old clock, the hinges holding the door. It didn't need to shine. It just needed to hold. And it always did. You sit at a table, your hand resting on its edge. You don't see the iron bolts beneath. You flip a light switch. The wires travel along iron brackets in the wall. You walk across the floor, supported by iron beams in the foundation. Nothing clangs. Nothing boasts. But the house is held together, not by luck, but by design. And in the bones of that design, iron. Iron doesn't have a flag. It doesn't serve a king. It doesn't care who owns it, but humans do. Throughout history, nations have risen and fallen over access to iron. Its ore, its mines, its forges. Iron has been taxed, traded, fought over, embargoed, and stolen. It has funded empires, built navies, armed legions, and often, behind the grandeur of emperors and governments, it was iron, raw, silent, and in demand, that told the real story. Tonight, we look beyond the forge, beyond the battlefield. We follow the iron trail through politics, policy, and empire, controlling the source, the first strategy of any empire with ambition: control the mines. The Hittites, around 1300 BCE, tightly guarded the secrets of iron smelting. Their ability to produce iron weapons gave them power until the knowledge spread. The Romans established ironworks across their provinces, from Britain to North Africa, ensuring a constant stream of material to feed their war machine. The Chinese Han Dynasty maintained state control over iron production, making it a central pillar of their economy and military. To own iron was to own independence. To lose it was to rely on others, a dangerous position in a world shaped by strength. Iron and colonial expansion in the 19th century. As European powers expanded across the globe, they didn't just look for spices or gold. They wanted iron and coal to smelt it. Colonial powers took over ore-rich lands, built railways to extract resources, established foundries to serve their own economies back home. Examples: Britain exploited iron in India, South Africa, and Australia. France mined in Algeria and Vietnam. Germany focused on its European territories and pushed into Africa. Colonies became not just markets, but feeders, their iron fueling the parent nation's expansion, while local populations rarely benefited. Tariffs, treaties, and trade wars. Iron isn't just a material. It's a strategic resource. Nations often use tariffs to protect their iron industries. In the 1800s, the U.S. imposed high tariffs on imported iron and steel to favor domestic production. Britain, once the workshop of the world, fought hard to keep its iron cheap and its exports flowing. In the 20th century, nations competed fiercely over access to foreign iron ore, negotiating with allies, pressuring colonies, or seizing it outright. Trade treaties became chess pieces, shipping routes became lifelines, and control over iron meant economic leverage. Iron and industrial power. Industrial might was built not just on invention, but on resources. Nations with large iron deposits and the infrastructure to use them rose faster. Britain, with iron in the Midlands and Wales, led the first industrial revolution. Germany, after unification, used iron from Lorraine and the Ruhr to fuel its military and manufacturing boom. The United States, with rich deposits in Minnesota, Pennsylvania, and Alabama, became an industrial superpower by the late 19th century. Each factory, each railroad, each ship added iron to the nation's political strength. War, blockades, and resource wars. In times of war, iron becomes more than an asset, it becomes a target. In World War I, the Allies blockaded Germany, cutting off iron imports from Scandinavia and crippling production. In World War II, Swedish iron ore became a critical lifeline for Nazi Germany, leading to battles over Norway's ports in the Pacific. Japan's need for raw materials, including iron, helped drive its imperial expansion into China and Southeast Asia. To cut off iron was to weaken the body of the enemy. To control iron was to breathe life into your own. Iron behind the curtain. After World War II, the world split into East and West. and both sides looked at iron as key to global influence. In the Soviet Union, iron and steel production was a core part of the five-year plans. American Cold War policy often included aid and trade agreements to secure access to raw materials around the world. Developing nations were pressured to align with one bloc or another based on how their iron resources could be exploited. Mines were mapped by diplomats. Foundries were monitored by spies. And the Cold War played out not just in speeches, but in shipments of ore and rebar. Iron nationalism in many countries. Iron production became a symbol of national pride. In India, the founding of Tata Steel in 1907 was seen as a move towards self-reliance and resistance to British dominance. Brazil, China, and South Korea invested heavily in state-supported steel industries as a way to project power. Leaders often stood before new ironworks in hard hats, claiming victory not in war, but in industry. Smokestacks became monuments. Blast furnaces became banners, and ironworkers were cast as builders of the nation, their sparks as patriotic as any anthem. Scarcity and competition. By the late 20th century, easily accessible iron began to grow scarce in some parts of the world. This led to increased mining in remote or ecologically fragile regions, more international ownership of local resources, tension between environmentalists and industrialists, fights over land rights, especially involving indigenous communities. The battle for iron was no longer only political. It was legal, moral, and increasingly environmental. Digital empires still need metal even in the information age. Iron hasn't left the stage. Servers are stored in steel racks. Cables are strung on iron poles. Data centers require iron-reinforced structures and massive cooling grids. And the machines that build microchips? Made with iron alloys, cut with steel tools, held together by bolts and plates. Your cloud is built on metal. A world weighted by iron, from the emperor's sword to the bureaucrat's bridge. From colonial trains to underground cables. From the rust of the old world to the polished steel of the new. Iron has quietly underpinned power, not by shouting, not by shining, but by showing up, strong and still, wherever ambition reached out. You walk through a quiet government plaza. The flags are still. The lights hum overhead. You pass a statue, iron beneath bronze. A railing, painted but chipped. A memorial, framed by rusted steel beams recovered from a war long ended. You touch the cool metal. No one notices, but that's how it's always been. Iron doesn't speak. It listens, and still it holds. Iron is invisible when it works. It hums beneath the weight of the world, holding up what we rarely think about: bridges, railways, sewers, water mains, streetlights. It is the skeleton of cities, not decorative, not celebrated, but utterly necessary. Without it, roads buckle, pipes collapse, trains stop, towers fall. Tonight, we walk the overlooked paths of iron, the ones beneath your feet, above your head, and beside your quietest journeys. Not the swords or sculptures, just the solid, ordinary iron that lets you get where you're going. The Iron Road. From horses to steel rails. Before iron, roads were little more than dirt trails. Even the famous Roman roads, made of stone, wore down under weight and weather. Enter the railway, a revolution of iron, steam, and motion. The first iron rails were laid in 18th century Britain, originally used in mines to guide carts more efficiently. Wooden tracks wore out too fast, so miners replaced them with cast iron rails, followed by wrought iron, and eventually steel. And then came the trains. In 1825, the Stockton and Darlington Railway opened, the world's first public railway to use steam locomotives. Soon after, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway followed. Iron had created a new kind of road, one that moved not just people, but entire economies. Miles of motion railways expanded like veins. Britain led the charge, but soon France, Germany, and the United States followed. By 1900, the US alone had laid more than 190,000 miles of track. In India, iron railways became the backbone of colonial logistics. Across Russia, the Trans-Siberian Railway stretched over 9,000 kilometers, an iron thread connecting east and west. And the core of it all was simple: iron rails on iron ties, holding the weight of iron trains. Every city connected. Every shipment possible. Every landscape changed. Iron bridges and viaducts as railways spread. They needed to cross rivers, gorges, and valleys. The answer? Iron bridges, elegant, strong, and seemingly impossible. Some of the most famous included the Britannia Bridge in Wales, 1850. A tubular iron structure, the Garabit Viaduct in France, designed by Gustave Eiffel, the Fourth Bridge in Scotland, a massive red cantilever that still carries trains today where, once you'd have to wait for a ferry or walk around a ravine, now you could ride over it, on tracks forged in fire. Sewer systems and iron beneath. The beauty of a modern city isn't just above ground, underneath. A maze of iron pipes carries water, waste, steam, gas, everything a city needs to function. In 19th century London, engineer Joseph Bazalgette designed a vast sewer network using cast iron pipes and brick-lined tunnels, helping eliminate cholera and reclaim the Thames. Elsewhere, manhole covers, made of iron, became quiet indicators of urban life. Grates, storm drains, and valve boxes protected cities from floods, and collapsed steam pipes under cities like New York turned iron into warmth. In winter, it wasn't glamorous. It wasn't noticed, but it worked. Water towers and tanks. Elevated iron water towers began appearing in the 1800s. Cylindrical or spherical, riveted or welded, painted or bare, they stored water high so gravity could carry it down into homes, factories, and hydrants. Without iron to shape them, cities couldn't grow upward. Skyscrapers couldn't rise. Apartments couldn't flush. Firefighters couldn't fight fires. Iron became the vessel of pressure, the silent guardian of flow. Street lamps and utility poles. By the late 1800s, cities began installing iron street lamps. Gaslit, later electric. Wrought iron posts carried light wires. Signs. Time. They were often beautifully designed, with scrollwork, finials, and flourishes, but still deeply functional. In rural areas, iron poles gave way to wood. But in cities, the grid was iron. Electric lines, telegraph cables, phone wires, all draped across quiet metal trees. Iron in everyday transit. It wasn't just trains. Iron touched elevators, rising in cages of riveted iron. Trams and trolleys, running on iron rails. Bicycles, with iron frames and spokes. Car chassis. Early automobiles shaped like carriages, but armored with iron bones. Even walking became a negotiation with iron, from grates on sidewalks to manhole covers to fencing. Along stairwells, you didn't notice it, but it was always underfoot. Rust never sleeps. Iron infrastructure has one mortal enemy. Rust, water, salt, and air conspire constantly to reclaim the metal. Flaking, cracking, swelling. Cities fight back. Painting and sealing, galvanizing, and coating, replacement and repair. It's a quiet war, fought on bridges, in tunnels, on towers. You don't hear it, but crews are always there, maintaining the skeleton, keeping the city upright. Modern materials, iron roots today, steel and concrete dominate much of modern infrastructure. Reinforced concrete uses steel bars, rebar. Inside suspension bridges rely on steel cables. Skyscrapers are built with high-strength alloys, but the principle is the same. Iron carries the weight. We've learned to alloy it, to hide it inside concrete, to paint it for beauty. But still, it's there, holding elevators, subway tunnels, stadium roofs, wind turbines, still carrying us. A walk at night, you step out into the street. The pavement is wet. You can hear water rushing beneath the grates. Ahead, a bridge hums as a train passes overhead. Iron on iron, echoing into the dark. A manhole cover glistens under the lamplight. You pause and look down. You don't know where it leads. You probably never will, but it's been there longer than you've been alive. Silently, without asking for thanks, it's held the city together. You cross the street. The light turns red. And behind you, the iron keeps working. Before the swords, before the bridges, before the statues, ships, and cities, iron had to be taken, not from markets, not from shelves, but from the deep earth, where it slept in stone, hidden in darkness, untouched for eons. Iron is not a gift. It's a burden we chose to lift, and for thousands of years, people have gone underground, with pickaxes, fire, drills, and dynamite, chasing veins of or that run through mountain and hill like the secret arteries of the planet. This is not the story of iron as glory. This is the story of iron as labor. The first digs long before anyone called it mining. Humans scratched the earth for useful stones. The earliest iron wasn't dug, it was discovered in meteorites, cold and metallic, falling from the sky in surface deposits of hematite, dark red, and staining in natural outcrops that glimmered oddly under sun and rain in ancient Egypt. They called meteoric iron from heaven. A sacred thing, rare, untamed. But then, curiosity turned practical, and people began to dig. Early mines and fire tunnels in Anatolia and the Near East. Miners began to chip away at hillsides where iron ore was near the surface, without explosives or modern tools. They relied on stone picks and antler tools, fire setting, building fires against the rock, then dousing it with water to crack its simple shafts. Reinforced with wood, these early tunnels were tight, hot, dangerous. They had no lights except torches, no ventilation but what the earth allowed. Still, they went deeper, because every inch meant more ore. And more ore meant tools, weapons, walls, wheels, everything a growing civilization needed. Rome and the rise of industrial mining. The Romans turned mining into a system. In Spain, Britain, and North Africa, they dug vast mines using slave labor, often condemned criminals or prisoners of war. They brought engineering, deep shafts, vertical lifts, drainage channels, water wheels to remove groundwater from flooded tunnels, organized labor divisions. From diggers to or washers, iron ore was pulled from hills in massive quantities, smelted, forged, sent to the heart of empire. But for the miners, often unseen, life underground was short. Many never surfaced again. Their names are gone. Their scars remain. The medieval mine in the Middle Ages. Mining towns formed around iron-rich regions. In Germany, Sweden, France, and the British Isles, iron became not just a product, but an economy. Men, women, and children labored, digging narrow shafts into hillsides, transporting ore in baskets on their backs, breathing in dust without knowledge of its cost. Mining guilds formed. Local lords taxed the ore, and smelters nearby turned it into tools, nails, and swords. But still, each piece of iron started in the dark, far below the surface. The Industrial Age. Going deeper with the Industrial Revolution came machines. Iron mining expanded rapidly. Steam-powered pumps cleared floodwater, mechanical drills and blasting made tunnels faster, mine carts and rail tracks moved or more efficiently. Iron mines went deeper than ever before, some over 1,500 meters underground. Regions like Pennsylvania, Yorkshire, and Lorraine became iron giants. But the work remained dangerous. Collapses, gas leaks, dust inhalation, long hours in silence, interrupted only by the clang of steel on stone, blackened lungs, broken bones, exhausted lives. Miners emerged each day covered in sweat and dust, their faces like shadows of the rock itself. The sound of extraction. If you stood inside an iron mine in 1890, you would hear the screech of iron wheels, the hiss of steam, the slow rhythm of pickaxes, the dull boom of dynamite shouts echoing in languages from across continents, and always the falling dust, like ash, like snow, like the mine exhaling. Above, the world marched forward. Below, iron was bought with breath, ghost mines and abandoned shafts. When a mine ran dry, it was left to the dark. Tunnels collapsed, water seeped in, timbers rotted, machinery rusted into strange skeletons. Whole towns vanished, once rich in iron, now reduced to broken carts and moss-covered wheels. These places exist still, beneath forests, under neighborhoods hidden in mountains, silent and unseen. If you walk too close, you may feel the chill, not just of wind, but of history underfoot. The environmental weight. Mining changed not just lives, but landscapes. Hills stripped bare, rivers polluted with tailings, soil contaminated with slag and ash, forests cut for smelting fuel. Iron lifted civilization, but it also left scars. Some we buried, some we built over, some still bleed rust after every rain. Today's iron mines, modern mines, are vast and automated, but no less heavy. In Australia, giant machines eat mountains by the ton. In Brazil, entire open-pit mines stretch for miles. In China, underground complexes hum with conveyor belts and ventilation systems. Safety is better, production is faster, but the work remains difficult. And the Earth, once cracked, never forgets. Between the layers, geologists say iron comes from ancient oceans, once carried in solution, then settled as sediment on seafloors billions of years ago. The rock itself, hematite, magnetite, is memory made solid. To mine it is to break open time, to reach through eons and take what formed before language or light. That it's not just labor. It's a kind of unintentional archaeology. Not all that's buried is dead. Some mines are now museums. Some are sealed forever. Some are just waiting. And deep inside the earth, iron still sleeps. Veins like red rivers. Crystals shaped by pressure. Stone darker than night. That we took what we could. We shaped what we took. And still, the earth holds more. Quietly, endlessly, unbothered by us. You step off the trail and into a collapsed shaft mouth. Overgrown, forgotten. A rusted cart lies on its side. An old helmet. A pair of boots half buried in dust. And moss. You pause. Here, the noise is gone. The machines. The fire. The hammering. Only wind now. You breathe in the damp air. Not just of soil, but of old iron. The kind that hasn't been touched in 100 years. No echoes. No footsteps. Just the weight of silence. And far below, iron still waits. Iron does not choose sides. It does not speak. It does not hate. But in the hands of humans, iron has become both shield and sword. It has decided battles, ended kingdoms, and shaped the course of history, not with speeches, but with weight, edge, and impact. Wherever humans have fought, iron has followed. From ancient blades to cannonballs, from ironclad ships to landmines, from helmets hammered on anvils to silent bullets pressed by machines. Tonight, we walk the fields long abandoned. We examine rusted weapons, twisted armor, shattered fragments, once held in fear or hope. We don't glorify. We simply observe, because if you listen closely, even iron remembers. The first iron weapons of bronze came first, soft, sharp, expensive. But as iron smelting advanced, so did iron warfare. By 1200 BCE, blacksmiths in Anatolia and the Near East began forging iron blades, arrowheads, and spear tips. Iron was more abundant than tin and copper, stronger when treated correctly, more accessible to smaller armies. And though early iron was often inferior to high-quality bronze, the balance tipped. Soon, Assyrian armies carried iron swords. Greek hoplites wielded iron-tipped spears. Celtic warriors forged iron knives for close combat. Iron arrowheads pierced deeper, farther, faster. The Iron Age was not just a technological shift. It was a shift in how battles were fought, and who could fight them. Armor. Iron as protection where weapons strike, armor defends. The Romans wore iron scale armor, larica squamata, and chainmail, larica hamata. In medieval Europe, knights were encased in full suits of iron plate, shining, jointed, imposing. Japanese samurai integrated iron plates into lacquered armor, balancing protection with mobility. Iron helmets, greaves, gauntlets, all carried the same unspoken promise. I will take the blow, so you don't have to. But iron is heavy. It slows. It heats. It exhausts. So every piece was a negotiation between strength and speed. That a soldier's breath beneath a helmet, the creak of metal at the shoulder, the slow rust from sweat. Even protection has a cost. Siege and scale iron allowed warfare to expand. Massive iron tipped. Battering rams crashed against castle gates. Catapults hurled iron balls across moats. Cannonballs, made of solid cast iron, shattered walls in thunderous waves. The introduction of gunpowder only increased iron's importance. Muskets, flintlocks, and rifles relied on iron barrels and triggers. Bayonets, attached to rifle ends, turned guns into spears. Artillery fired iron shells that exploded on impact. Heat, shrapnel, smoke. The battlefield changed from clash to concussion, from sword to shockwave. And everywhere, iron was present, as flying fragments, buried casings, and silent remnants in the soil. Naval warfare. The ironclads by the 19th century, wood was no longer enough at sea. In 1859, France launched the Gaulois, the first ocean-going ironclad. In 1862, the American Civil War saw the Battle of the Monitor and the Merrimack, two ironclad warships that changed naval warfare forever. These ships could shrug off cannonballs carried rotating turrets were powered by steam, not sails. Had iron hulls layered with wood for shock absorption, the age of naval elegance had ended. The age of armored dominance had begun, and once again, iron was at the core. Trenches and fragmentation in the 20th century, iron warfare grew colder, more distant, more industrial. World War I introduced barbed wire, twisted from steel helmets stamped from single sheets of iron, the German Stahlhelm, the British Brodie, shrapnel shells filled with jagged iron pieces, tanks clad in iron plate, rumbling across no man's land. The mud of the trenches swallowed metal. The air whistled with it. The ground became a graveyard of twisted iron and shattered men. There was no glory, only endurance, mass production. Iron without art in earlier centuries. Every weapon was unique, handmade, named, passed down. But with the Industrial Revolution came uniformity. Factories pressed bullets by the thousands. Standardized rifles rolled off assembly lines. Artillery shells were filled, sealed, and stacked like firewood. Iron lost its individuality. It became numbers on ledgers, tonnage on ships, output per day. That a war was no longer a series of duels. It was logistics, iron, and scale. More steel, more speed, more fire. Weapons of resistance. Not all iron weapons served empires and armies. In guerrilla wars, rebels forged knives and guns from scrap metal. In occupied cities, iron pipes and rods became makeshift weapons. In prisons, spoons were filed into shanks. In homes, pans and bolts were gripped in fear when no sword was near. Iron was adaptable, loyal to no one. It could defend as easily as it could conquer. And it often did both in the same day. Commemoration, iron in memorial. After war, iron remains. It's melted into statues, horses rearing, generals pointing, soldiers standing still. It's shaped into crosses and stars, placed in fields and town squares. It's laid in cemetery fences, memorial gates, and eternal flame structures. Sometimes, it's left exactly where it fell. A rusted rifle in a museum, an unexploded shell in the woods, a helmet under glass. These pieces do not shout. They do not celebrate. They simply sit. And remember, tonight, on a battlefield gone quiet, you walk through a clearing. There is no noise, just wind and rain. A field, once full of motion, is still. You find a piece of something, round, cracked, dark. A musket ball. You roll it in your fingers. You picture it flying once. Fast, fatal, hot. Now it's cold, heavy, silent. You place it back. The battle is over. The wounds are old. The iron rests. Let it lie. Let it rust. Let the war pass. Iron is not gentle. It is heavy. It stains your hands. It resists shaping. And yet, for centuries, humans have bent it toward beauty, because iron doesn't just build. It expresses. In gates and grills, in sculptures and scrolls, in tools and weapons made too beautifully to use. When forged in silence, iron becomes a canvas, one that reflects not just strength, but imagination, culture, and craftsmanship. Tonight, we enter workshops, museums, quiet gardens. We stand beneath balconies, behind fences, under lanterns, and we listen to what iron has whispered in ornament and art for centuries. Iron as decoration. The unexpected muse. In the earliest days, iron was used only for function. It was too precious to be wasted on beauty. But as methods of forging improved and iron became more available, something shifted. Blacksmiths began to decorate. A hammer handle might bear a swirl. A sword hilt might have a dragon etched in. A gate might feature flowers, vines, even birds. Slowly, beauty entered the forge, because even the strongest material longed to be seen. Wrought iron. The artist's medium. The key to artistic ironwork was wrought iron, a form of iron that could be heated, bent, twisted, and hammered repeatedly without cracking. Unlike brittle cast iron, wrought iron was forgiving in the hands of a skilled smith. It was used for fences and gates, balconies and stair railings, lamp posts and chandeliers, fireplace screens and curtain rods, ornamental grills on windows and doors. In the hands of a master, wrought iron could be delicate, curling into vines, spirals, stars, and songbirds. Heavy, yet light on the eyes. Ironwork around the world. Every culture shaped iron in its own way. In France, The wrought iron balconies of Paris became iconic, a dance of curves and symmetry. Art Nouveau designers like Hector Guimard turned iron into flowing organic forms, metro entrances that look like growing plants. In Spain, the Rios, tall iron screens, adorned churches and cathedrals, separating sacred from secular. Catalan modernism, especially in Gaudi's works, used iron like ivy climbing up buildings. In Islamic architecture, ironwork emphasized geometry, repetition, and symmetry, endless star patterns and lattices that seemed to breathe. In China and Japan, iron was used more subtly, in lanterns, door hinges, teapots, and gates, always balanced between simplicity and strength. Each place spoke a different visual language. But iron translated it all, tools as beauty sometimes. The beauty was hidden in function. A set of blacksmith tongs, with elegant handles, a cooking pan with a filigreed grip, a sword whose pattern is layered like flowing water, a lock that's shaped like a lion's head. These were not made for galleries. They were made for hands, used, touched, worn, and still beautiful. Religious and symbolic iron. In many traditions, iron held symbolic power. In Europe, iron crosses marked graves and roadsides, simple, strong, and enduring. In Africa, forged iron objects were used in rituals, knives, bells, staffs, often believed to hold spiritual energy. In India, iron bells were hung in temples, each tone tuned for harmony with the universe. In Tibet, iron wheels spun prayers into the wind. Iron became not just a tool, but a channel, a way to reach the divine. And the more meaningful it became, the more beautiful it was made. The blacksmith as artista blacksmith was once seen as just a worker. But in time, many became known as artists. Some were anonymous, signing only with a hidden mark. Others, like Samuel Yellen, U.S., became internationally renowned for their iron gates and screens in public buildings and cathedrals. Blacksmiths used no sketchpad. Their medium was heat and instinct that a mistake couldn't be erased, only hammered again, or melted down. The process was slow, repetitive, intimate. It was not mass production. It was conversation between fire and hand, sculptures in Irona's casting. Improved, iron took on bolder forms. Monumental sculptures in public parks, iron fountains and clock towers, decorative panels on buildings, garden statues, and busts. Even when painted or hidden beneath vines, iron stood its ground. It didn't demand attention. It waited for you to notice, and when you did, it surprised you with its patience, its detail, its quiet confidence. Rust and time. Iron is not immortal. It rusts. It weathers. It flakes. And in that, there is beauty too. A rusted iron gate tells of time, of rain, of sun, of years of hands pushing it open. Every stain is a memory. Every pit a pause in history. Art in iron is not static. It ages. It changes. It breathes. Iron art today, though steel and aluminum dominate industry now, wrought iron survives. In art studios, workshops, and hobbyist forges, artisans still forge scrolls and leaves for custom railings, make hand-wrought curtain rods and bed frames, craft one-of-a-kind weather vanes and signs, restore centuries-old gates and grills. No 3D printer can fully replace the human hand in iron. Each twist still tells a story. Each hammer mark is a signature. Tonight, at the Iron Gate, you pass an old building. Its gate is black iron, flaking paint, a little crooked. You pause and look closer. A bird, hidden in the metal. A leaf curling around a bar. An old weld, nearly invisible. You rest your hand on it. It's cold, solid, familiar. You wonder who made it. How long they stood there, sweating over coals, shaping it stroke by stroke. You wonder how many have walked past without noticing. Tonight, you notice. Let the pattern hold. Let the scroll unfold. Let the iron speak. Let it rain. Cities weren't always made of metal. Once, they were mud and timber, then brick and stone. But one day, humanity looked higher, wider, stronger, and we needed something more. We needed a material that wouldn't splinter, wouldn't crack, wouldn't burn so easily. We needed something that could carry the weight of dreams, factories, cathedrals, and skyscrapers. We turned to iron. And the city began to rise. Tonight, we step into the growing shadows of buildings. We trace beams with our fingers. We walk up staircases that should have collapsed. And we remember the metal that made it all stand. The age before iron, architecture had limitations, wood warped and burned. Stone was heavy, expensive, and slow to shape. Buildings had to be wide to be tall, each new floor demanding thicker walls and deeper foundations. But then came iron. At first, it was used for small things: hinges, nails, balcony railings, window grills, gate mechanisms. But eventually, someone realized, what if the frame itself was metal? The entire weight of a structure could be carried not by stone, but by iron beams. The skyline would never be the same again. Iron bridges. The first leap before buildings soared. Bridges tested what iron could do. In 1779, the Iron Bridge was built over the River Severn in England, the first major bridge. Made entirely from cast iron. It was a bold experiment. Designed by Abraham Darby III, constructed from over 380 tons of cast iron assembled using carpentry techniques applied to metal. People were skeptical. Some feared it would collapse. It didn't. Instead, it stood, solid, elegant, enduring. More followed. The Menai Suspension Bridge, Wales, 1826. The Eads Bridge, St. Louis, 1874. The Forth Bridge, Scotland, 1890. A towering lattice of red-painted steel. Each one proved iron could stretch across water, wind, and time. The iron frame. The skeleton of cities. The key breakthrough in architecture was the iron frame. Instead of using thick stone or brick walls to hold up floors, builders used a metal skeleton. Iron columns to carry vertical weight, iron beams to support floors, and ceilings cross-bracing to resist wind and sway. This changed everything. Buildings could go higher, not limited by stone's weight. They could have larger windows. Walls no longer needed to be load-bearing. They could be built faster. Iron parts were prefabricated and bolted into place. The modern city had found its bones. Warehouses, markets, and factories. Some of the earliest iron-frame buildings were practical, not pretty. Warehouses and ports, like Liverpool and Boston, used iron columns to hold vast loads. Factories adopted iron to create wide, open interiors for machines and workers. Markets like Les Halles in Paris or Smithfield in London used iron roofing to create enormous indoor spaces. These were places of work and commerce. They smelled of oil, rain, and iron. People didn't often look up, but above them, beams held everything in place, silent and strong. Cast iron versus wrought iron. Two forms of iron-shaped architecture. Cast iron, hard, brittle, poured into molds. Great for decorative elements and columns. Wrought iron, malleable, fibrous, hammered into shape. Used for gates, railings, and later, structural parts. Each had its place. In Victorian cities, cast iron added ornament, spirals, scrolls, leaves, flowers, to even the most utilitarian buildings. Wrought iron offered flexibility and grace. Sweeping staircases, flowing balconies, tight railings. Iron wasn't just strong. It was beautiful. The Eiffel Tower. Iron ascends in 1889. The world saw something new. The Eiffel Tower, nearly 1,000 feet tall, made entirely of iron latticework, rose above Paris. It shocked the public. Many called it ugly, mechanical, brutal, but it became an icon, not just of Paris, but of what iron could do. Over 18,000 pieces of puddled iron held together by 2.5 million rivets designed to sway with the wind, not break. Built in just over 2 years, it stood not just because of engineering, but because iron could be both massive and airy, strong and light. The world had entered the age of height. Iron and fire. Iron wasn't perfect. In extreme heat, it could warp or fail. The Great Chicago Fire of 1871 and other urban disasters revealed iron's weaknesses when exposed to prolonged fire. Builders adapted, encasing iron columns in brick or concrete, using fireproof coatings, replacing cast iron with steel, which handled stress better. But iron had already proven its worth. Its place in architecture was secure. Iron in homes and everyday spaces. Not all iron was monumental. It found its way into stair railings, fireplace grates, beds, and furniture, balconies, and lantern hooks in brownstones and row houses. Iron gates guarded the steps. Iron bootscrapers sat by the door. Iron numbers marked addresses. It was the background metal, rarely noticed, always working. Iron gives way to steel by the late 19th and early 20th century. steel began to replace iron in construction. Steel is iron with just enough carbon and treatment to make it stronger, more elastic, and less brittle. Still, steel was born from iron. Its tools, its methods, its legacy, the skyscrapers of New York, the bridges of San Francisco, they owe their existence to centuries of iron architecture. Iron laid the foundations. Steel raised the rest. Tonight, in an iron hallway you stand in an old building. Its hallway quiet, its floor worn smooth. Above you, an iron chandelier hangs. Its chains creak in the wind. Beside you, a railing twists upward, each curl shaped long ago by a craftsman's hand. You run your fingers along it. It's cool, firm, slightly dusty, but still here. You walk up the stairs. The steps groan softly. You imagine the thousands of feet that have climbed them. Workers, children, strangers, friends. Iron held them all. It holds you now. Let it stay. Let it support. Let it stand. Let it reign. We often think of iron as something external, buildings, bridges, rails, weapons. But what happens when iron gets closer? When it becomes part of how we live, move, and survive? Iron has not only built the world around us, it has also reshaped the human body in visible and invisible ways, from surgical instruments to prosthetic limbs, from dental braces to the iron in our blood. Metal has found its way under our skin, around our bones, and even inside our cells. Tonight, we leave the battlefield and the factory. We enter hospitals, workshops, living rooms. We study tools not for war or wealth, but for healing, repair, and restoration. Let us sit quietly with the bodies that carry iron. Let us listen. The oldest surgical tools before antiseptic, before anesthesia, before germ theory, there were tools. Simple, sharp, and made of iron. Ancient surgeons used scalpels, hooks, saws, and forceps, many crafted from wrought iron. The Romans had entire surgical kits with over 100 types of tools, many iron-based. In India, Ayurvedic texts described iron tools for removing kidney stones and setting fractures. In Egypt, iron tweezers and probes were used in embalming and treating wounds. They were cleaned with vinegar, heated in flame, or simply wiped off. They didn't always save lives, but sometimes they did, and that was enough. Iron in the rise of prosthetics when a limb was lost through war, accident, or disease. The loss was not only physical, it was also personal. Over centuries, people created devices to restore motion or appearance, and iron played a key role. In the Middle Ages, knights wore iron hand prostheses, some articulated with small gears. In the Renaissance, craftsmen designed iron legs with jointed knees and supportive cuffs. In the 18th and 19th centuries, iron was used in peg legs, hooks, and braces, strong enough to support weight. These prosthetics were often heavy, sometimes uncomfortable, but they offered dignity, function, and hope. A man who could walk again. A soldier who could grip a sword, if only symbolically. A child who could balance, even in silence. Iron gave back motion. Iron in dentistry teeth, too, became home to iron. Ancient dental bridges sometimes used iron wires to hold in place artificial teeth. In the 18th century, iron clamps and screws were employed in early orthodontic devices. Blacksmiths and barbers often doubled as tooth pullers, using iron pliers and hooks. By the 19th century, iron instruments were part of every dental kit. Mirrors, scalers, forceps, all gleaming. Cold, precise. For many, these tools were terrifying. But for others, they meant relief, repair, and the ability to smile without pain. Internal iron, braces, plates, and pins in modern medicine. Iron and its alloys became more than tools. It became part of the body. Steel rods are inserted to stabilize broken bones. Iron plates hold fractured skulls together. Surgical screws, pins, and nails keep hips, knees, and ankles from collapsing. Even pacemakers are encased in protective alloys, often stainless steel or titanium blends. The body and the metal must work together. The metal cannot rust, cannot corrode. It must endure the heat, the salt, the motion, all without harming the flesh. This is not iron from the forge. This is biocompatible engineering. Metal, not as enemy, but as partner. The iron in our blood, there's a quiet truth. You carry iron inside you. not just as implants or braces, but deep in your very cells. Hemoglobin, the protein in your red blood cells, contains iron atoms. These atoms bind to oxygen, allowing your blood to carry it from your lungs to your muscles, your brain, your fingers. Without iron, you cannot breathe. You cannot move. You cannot think. Iron isn't just under the skin. It's inside your life. A healthy adult carries about 4 grams of iron, less than a teaspoon. And yet, without it, life slowly fades into exhaustion. Tools of care and support iron built hospitals, beams, beds, rails. But more subtly, it shaped care itself. Wheelchairs once made of wood became lighter and stronger with iron frames. Crutches, braces, and surgical beds used iron parts to provide durability. Hospital carts, stretchers, syringe racks, and holes were all strengthened with steel. For every quiet night in a hospital, for every hour someone waited to heal, iron was there. It held, it rolled, it steadied, and it never asked for credit. The iron craftsmen of healing. Not all healers wore white coats. In villages and towns across the world, artisans and tinkerers built medical tools long before hospitals existed. A blacksmith reforged a cane for an old man. A carpenter added iron braces to a child's leg support. A farmhand twisted wire into a jaw brace after a horse kicked his friend. Necessity bred invention, and iron was always at hand. Every village had someone who could make something that helped, quietly, without applause. Beauty, function, and dignity. Sometimes, iron was not just about healing. It was about wholeness. An iron prosthetic shape too. Looked like a real hand. A leg jointed to mimic the rhythm of a walk. A facial plate, made from steel, to help a soldier walk through town without fear. These devices weren't perfect, but they gave comfort. A sense that one could still live, still work, still be seen. Iron held more than flesh. It held dignity. Tonight, in a quiet clinic, it's late. The lights are dim. You're sitting in a small room. White walls, clean shelves. You hear the faint beep of a heart monitor. A wheelchair creaks in the hallway. On the shelf, tools. A scalpel, a brace, a model, knee joint with an iron rod inside. Simple things. You pick up a surgical pin, barely the length of a finger. It once held a femur together. Now it's just resting. You place it back. You think of all the lives these objects have touched, all the pain they eased, all the motion they restored. And as the rain begins outside, you realize iron does not always shout. Sometimes it supports, quietly. Let it rest. Let it hold. Let the metal sleep. Let it rain. Empires are often remembered by their borders, their flags, their wars. But underneath all of that, beneath the marble palaces, the gold coins, the military uniforms, there was always iron. In the colonial age, iron was no longer just a tool or a weapon. It became something more powerful, a system. It enabled conquest. It built ships. It armed armies. It laid railroads across continents that weren't asking for them. And it kept those railroads running long after the gunpowder had gone quiet. Tonight, we walk the rail lines of empire. We enter the mines. We open the ledgers. And we listen to the silent hum of iron, stretched across the globe. The engine of expansion. By the 18th and 19th centuries, European powers were locked in a race for territory. Africa, Asia, the Americas, explorers mapped. Diplomats negotiated. But it was iron that made it all possible. Ships with iron hulls carried soldiers and supplies across oceans. Guns, reinforced with steel, tipped the balance in uneven conflicts. Railways stitched newly claimed territories into networks of extraction. Telegraph wires, strung on iron posts, sent news faster than messengers ever could. Iron was not the face of empire, but it was the bones, the iron behind the red coat. In the British Empire, iron became a standard issue. British soldiers carried bayonets and rifles with iron components. Military outposts were often prefabricated with iron nails, hinges, and braces. Cast iron cannons lined the decks of Royal Navy ships. Iron cooking gear, camp stoves, and mess kits made military logistics more reliable. Even more invisibly, iron kept the empire moving. From iron wheels on artillery wagons to iron keys that locked colonial storehouses, it was always there, silently. Maintaining control, railroads of dominion. One of the greatest tools of empire was not the musket, but the railroad. In India, The British laid over 60,000 kilometers of railway by the early 20th century, largely for moving goods, troops, and resources. Iron rails, forged in Wales and shipped across oceans. Iron locomotives, fired by coal dug from colonial mines. Iron bridges, designed to cross rivers that flooded with monsoons. Iron tools, used to lay track in punishing heat. These were not passenger trains for comfort. They were arteries of extraction, moving cotton, tea, coal, and ore out to the ports, and then back to Europe. And once in place, they became permanent, lines of influence drawn in metal. Iron mining in the colonies' empires needed more iron than ever before, and they didn't always want to buy it, so they began extracting it directly from their colonies. In Africa, iron ore mines sprang up in regions like Algeria, Nigeria, and South Africa. In India, colonial companies took control of rich deposits in Bihar and Odisha. In Brazil, Peru, and Australia, iron was dug from the earth and sent overseas. Miners, often locals working under colonial rule, labored in harsh conditions. They were given minimal pay, minimal safety. They were far from home, and even farther from the profits. Iron flowed outward. The wealth stayed behind, in banks, in factories, in stock exchanges far from the mine. Iron, resistance, and rebellion, but iron didn't serve empire alone. Sometimes, it served those who resisted it. In the Ashanti Wars of West Africa, indigenous iron weapons and armor met British rifles. In India, local smiths secretly repaired rebel weapons during uprisings. In Mexico, revolutionaries repurposed iron rails into barricades. In Haiti, enslaved workers in iron shops helped craft tools for the revolution. The empire brought iron, but it could not control it entirely. Iron empowered rebellion, just as it had empowered conquest. The forge, once a colonial asset, could become a symbol of resistance. The cast iron city iron didn't just conquer. It also built in colonial capitals like Bombay, Cairo, Jakarta, and Havana. Iron was everywhere, in the columns of government buildings, in the gates of villas and hotels, in the streetlights, railings, and manhole covers. The IT gave these cities a uniform style, a kind of European permanence, but iron rusts. And so, many of these cities still wear that quiet symbol of empire: flaking paint, rusted bolts, creaking hinges, beautiful, but heavy with memory. The quiet accounting iron was counted, weighed, and recorded. Colonial ledgers listed how many tons were mined, how many rails were laid, how many bullets were forged, how much scrap was melted and reused. Every ounce had value. Every shipment had a cost. And in between the lines of those balance sheets were the lives that did the work. Anonymous, unrecorded, spent. Empires measured iron by tonnage, but never by burden. Legacy in the dirt. Many former colonies still carry the legacy of the colonial forge. Abandoned tracks, silent stations, rusted locomotives, old mines swallowed by vines. Children play near piles of slag that once fed European factories. Villages grow around furnaces no one uses anymore. The iron is still there, but now it belongs to time. Tonight, on the quiet track you walk along an old railway line. The iron rails are rusty, half buried in dirt and grass. The wooden ties are soft with moss. A metal spike juts upward, stubborn, crooked, forgotten. You stop and kneel. You brush away the leaves. You place your hand on the cold rail. You imagine how many times this track echoed with the sound of wheels. You don't hear a train now. Only the wind. Only the soft rhythm of rain. The empire is gone, but the iron remains, mute, waiting, still. Let it wait. Let it rust. Let the past rest. Let it rain. The forge used to be small, personal, quiet. A man, a hammer, a fire. But one day, something shifted. The forge got bigger. The hammer got faster. The fire got hotter. And iron, once a slow craft, became an engine of the modern world. This was no longer just blacksmithing. This was industry. The Industrial Revolution was not loud in the beginning. It started with wheels turning in still valleys, steam hissing through narrow pipes. And behind it all, iron. Tonight, we enter the age when metal stopped following humans and began driving them. The dawn of industrial iron. Before the 1700s, most iron was made in small batches using bloomery furnaces. It was a slow process, labor-intensive, and limited in scale, but the demand was growing. Cities were expanding. Ships needed stronger nails and anchors. Railways were being dreamed of. Machines were being imagined to meet this need. Ironmaking had to change. In 1709, Abraham Darby made a small but critical discovery. He smelted iron ore using coke, a fuel made from coal, instead of charcoal. Coke burned hotter and longer, and it didn't rely on dwindling forests. With this, furnaces could run hotter, longer, more efficiently. The age of the blast furnace had truly begun. The blast furnace and pig iron blast furnace is enormous, towering, cylindrical, glowing from within. Iron, ore, coke, and limestone are poured in from the top. Hot air is blasted from below. The furnace runs constantly, day and night, like a hungry machine. Out of the bottom comes molten iron. It flows into sand molds shaped like piglets. Suckling a sow, hence the name pig iron. Pig iron is hard and brittle, full of carbon. On its own, it's not very useful, but it could be refined into wrought iron for tools and rails, or cast iron for pipes and engines. The volume was staggering. In one day, a blast furnace could produce more iron than a small village could make in a month. The world was changing. Iron rails and moving worlds, nothing transformed the landscape quite like the railway. The first major railways used iron rails. Heavy and durable, iron wheels turned on iron tracks. Iron boilers powered the steam engines. Iron bridges carried locomotives over rivers. Iron spikes nailed tracks across continents. Suddenly, coal moved faster. Goods arrived cheaper. People traveled farther. Time itself felt quicker. Trains were loud. Yes, but their skeleton was silent iron, and beneath every journey, every whistle, every screech of brakes was a blackened steel frame. Iron ships and ocean power. Before the 19th century, ships were made of wood, but as iron-making advanced, builders began crafting iron-hulled vessels, ships that could resist rot, endure impact, and carry more cargo. In 1819, the SS Savannah became the first steamship to cross the Atlantic. By mid-century, massive iron warships patrolled imperial waters. Iron engines churned constantly below deck, strong, loud, tireless. The oceans, once ruled by wind and sail, now bent to steam and steel. And yet, deep in the ship's belly, it was still about fire and iron. The factory. The new forge. The blacksmith's forge was once the heart of a village. Now, it became the factory. Rows of furnaces. Endless. Stacks of ingots. Cranes swinging beams into place. The smell of oil and smoke. The hammering replaced by the hiss of hydraulic presses. The clatter of conveyor belts. The roar of boilers. Factories built. Steam engines, rail components, factory machines, bridges, and buildings, weapons, and armor. Iron workers no longer knew every piece by hand. But the skill remained, just amplified, multiplied, accelerated. Iron and the city. With more iron came more cities. Iron was in the girders of buildings, in the pipes under the streets, in the lamps, the fences, the gates, the tram tracks, the elevators, the printing presses. Iron was infrastructure. It didn't draw attention, but it made everything possible. Cities expanded not just horizontally, but vertically, up into the sky. Iron frames allowed for taller buildings. And later, steel would take them even higher. But it started with the quiet strength of iron. Labor and iron. With industrial growth came new kinds of labor. Men, women, and children worked in iron foundries, often under harsh, dangerous conditions. Heat that burned skin, machines that mangled limbs, air filled with ash and fumes, days that stretched from darkness to darkness. But still, people came. Because iron meant work. Iron meant wages. Iron meant survival. Every gear turned by a machine was a story of human effort. The quiet within the noise. The Industrial Revolution was loud. Steam whistles, factory horns, clanking presses. But beneath the surface, it was still about material. The quality of ore, the temperature of the furnace, the angle of a mold. The human touch had changed, but not vanished. The world was no longer shaped by one man at a forge. It was shaped by many, working together, each doing a small task that added up to something enormous. And the heart of it all, still, was iron. Tonight, in a sleeping mill town, the smokestacks no longer belch fire. The factory lights are off. You walk through a quiet town where iron once roared. The streets are damp. The air smells faintly of oil and rust. A fence squeaks in the wind, held by old iron nails. You pass a foundry gate. Its sign is worn. The windows are dark. Inside, the shadows still remember. You stop beside a loading dock. A thick iron chain lies curled like a sleeping snake. You rest your hand on it. Cold, strong, heavy, and you think of all the hands that lifted iron, and how many never got credit. You think of every silent beam holding up every bridge. You breathe. And as the rain begins again, you feel the world settle. Let the fire rest. Let the wheels sleep. Let the iron cool. Let it rain. Iron is not found lying around in rivers like gold. It doesn't sparkle in the sunlight. It doesn't announce its presence. Iron hides deep inside stone. And yet, somehow, ancient people learned to find it, extract it, and shape it into tools. They did this without textbooks, without chemistry, without machines, only with fire, observation, persistence, and time. Tonight, we return to the beginning of the process, to the quiet hillsides, the dark mines, and the simple furnaces where iron was born. This is the story of how we pulled metal from the earth, one stone at a time. The hidden metal most of the iron in nature is locked in ores, rocks that contain metals, mixed with other elements. The most common iron ores are hematite, iron oxide, reddish black, magnetite, a black, magnetic, or goethite, limonite, and siderite. Early people didn't know these names, but they noticed things. Some rocks were heavier than others. Some, when struck, sparked. Some changed color in the fire. And somewhere, someone noticed that heating certain rocks made a metallic lump appear in the ashes. That moment, quiet, unnoticed, changed history. Early smelting, fire, and patience to extract iron. Ancient people had to heat iron or to extremely high temperatures, enough to reduce the oxygen and leave behind metal. This was done in bloomery furnaces, simple, clay or stone structures fed by charcoal and air. The process was slow and delicate. Ore and charcoal were layered inside. A bellows pumped air, increasing the heat, often over 1,200 degrees Celsius. The ore slowly reduced, forming a spongy mass of iron called a bloom. This bloom was removed, hammered, and purified, removing slag and creating wrought iron. It could take hours, sometimes days, and produce just a few kilograms of usable metal, but it was enough for a tool, a nail, a knife, a beginning. Mining the stone before iron could be smelted, it had to be found. Ancient miners had no drills or explosives. They used picks, chisels, and fire setting, a method where fires were built against rock faces to crack the stone through thermal shock. Once loosened, rocks were hauled out in baskets or sleds. Mining was dangerous. Tunnels collapsed. Fumes built up. Water flooded shafts. And most miners worked in darkness, guided by memory, touch, and the faint glow of oil lamps. It was not glamorous work, but it was the start of every sword, every plow, every nail, fueling the fire. Charcoal, the heart of early ironwork, was not just the ore, it was charcoal. Charcoal burned hotter and cleaner than wood. It allowed furnaces to reach the temperatures needed for smelting, but making charcoal was its own quiet science. Wood was stacked in large piles or kilns. It was covered in earth or turf to limit oxygen. Slowly burned for days, releasing water, tar, and volatile gases. What remained was pure carbon, charcoal. Entire forests were cut and managed for charcoal production. Villages had dedicated charcoal burners who lived in the woods and tended slow-burning piles. Their smoke curled through the trees. Few people saw them, but without their work, iron would not exist. Slag and byproducts. Early furnaces didn't just make iron. They made slag, the glassy waste left over after smelting. Slag is often found in ancient industrial sites, black, brittle, and sharp. To archaeologists, slag is a signature, a silent record of human effort. The size and composition of slag piles reveal how much iron was made, what or was used, how hot the furnaces got, how skilled the workers were. The fossil of metalworking. Evidence of invisible labor. Smelting sites around the world. Iron extraction wasn't isolated. It happened independently across cultures. Hittites, modern Turkey, smelted iron as early as 1500 BCE. India had advanced furnaces by 1000 BC, some capable of producing high-carbon steel. In Africa, regions like Tanzania and Nigeria developed deep shaft furnaces, innovative, efficient, and unique. China developed blast furnaces earlier than Europe, powered by clever bellows systems. In Northern Europe, bog iron, a naturally forming or from wetlands, was collected and smelted by early peoples. Every culture, every geography, found its own way to unlock the stone. They didn't all share languages, but they shared a skill, turning rock into strength. From dirt to sword, the journey from raw earth to iron weapon was long, or had to be found. Charcoal had to be burned. Furnaces had to be built and tended. Slag had to be removed. Blooms had to be hammered. Iron had to be shaped. All before a single nail could be driven. All before a single soldier could raise a blade. No shortcuts. No machines. Only fire, air, patience, and knowledge passed from one calloused hand to another. The smell of the earth mining had a smell. Hot stone, wet dirt, sweat, smoke. Forges had their own scent, too, dry and sharp. A mix of charcoal, metal, ash, and something like thunder held in your nose. That to work with iron was to carry its smell everywhere. On your clothes, your skin, your hair. It never quite left you. Even today, some blacksmiths say they can smell a hot bloom from across a room, and it pulls them back, like memory. Tonight, by the cold furnace, the fire has gone out. The tools are resting. Outside, the rain falls on a muddy hillside, once the edge of an iron mine. The stones glisten. The grass whispers in the wind. In the dark, you imagine the past. A miner dragging a heavy sack of ore. A charcoal burner tending a slow fire under a tarp. A smith waking early to prepare the bellows. The clang of metal, the hiss of steam, the silence after. You breathe in the damp air. You feel the earth beneath you. And you remember, everything we've built came from here, from deep in the ground, from quiet hands and slow fires. Let that truth settle around you. Let it cool your thoughts. Let it weigh you down like warm iron. Let it rain. Iron has always been a tool, a blade in the field, a hinge on a door, a nail in a beam. But iron also became something darker. It became a weapon, and weapons, once forged, tend to find their way into hands that know how to use them. As iron spread, so did the scope and scale of war. Not in loud revolutions, not in sudden explosions, but in the slow, steady accumulation of advantage. A sharper blade, a stronger spear, a longer campaign. Tonight, we follow iron from the forge to the battlefield. Before the blade, the rise of iron weapons. For centuries, bronze had been the metal of choice for tools and weapons. It was beautiful, golden in hue, and easy to shape. But bronze had limits. It was soft. It dented easily. It bent. And perhaps most critically, it depended on tin, a resource that was rare and often imported. Iron, by contrast, was everywhere. It took more work to forge. It required hotter fires, more fuel, more patience. But once mastered, it outperformed bronze in nearly every way. The first iron weapons were crude, thicker, heavier, more likely to shatter, but smiths learned. They began mixing iron with small amounts of carbon, forming steel, harder, more resilient, deadlier, and with better metal came better armies. The Assyrian machine. The Assyrian Empire was one of the first major powers to fully embrace iron weaponry. By the 9th century BCE, their armies were equipped with iron swords, iron-tipped spears, and reinforced armor. Their enemies still fought with bronze. The results were devastating. Iron gave the Assyrians penetrating power. Their blades split shields, pierced armor, and shattered formations. But iron was not only a weapon of destruction, it was a tool of organization. Iron enabled mass production of gear, standardized tools for siege engines, efficient transportation over newly reinforced roads. The Assyrian army didn't just win through fear. They won through iron discipline and iron tools. Greek hoplites and iron unity in ancient Greece. Warfare changed dramatically with the rise of the hoplite, a citizen soldier equipped with a round shield, spear, and armored at the heart of his gear. Iron helmets, iron breastplates, iron-tipped spears. He stood in the phalanx formation, shoulder to shoulder with his neighbors in battle. It wasn't just his strength that mattered. It was his ability to hold the line. iron, enabled this. The armor lasted. The weapons didn't break under pressure. The shields held firm. Greek warfare became more than bravery. It became a system, one where iron was the foundation. Rome. War by infrastructure. The Roman legions were perhaps the most efficient military force the world had ever seen. They marched thousands of miles, built roads as they went, and carried everything they needed, including the tools of death, all made of iron. The gladius, a short, stabbing sword, deadly in close quarters. The pilum, a throwing spear with an iron tip designed to bend after impact, preventing the enemy from throwing it back. Iron shovels, axes, saws, and hammers for building forts and camps. But beyond the weapons, Roman war was about endurance. Iron made that endurance possible. That it allowed them to outlast their enemies. To build, to rebuild, to repair, to keep going long after others had broken. The Iron Age of Europe. As the Iron Age spread across Europe, small tribes transformed into warrior societies. The Celts made elaborate iron swords, often decorated and curved for slashing. The Germanic tribes favored heavier weapons, broad axes, spears, and throwing blades. The Iberians forged curved falcatas, short swords known for their cutting power. Iron gave these tribes an edge, literally and strategically. And while they lacked the centralized organization of Rome, their weapons were often equal in quality. Blacksmiths became vital members of these communities, not just as craftsmen, but as armament suppliers. And when tribes went to war, they went with iron. The iron horse. Iron didn't only serve the infantry. It transformed cavalry. With stronger saddles, reinforced stirrups, and iron horseshoes, armies could now move faster and fight harder from horseback. Iron-tipped lances could pierce armor from full gallop. Iron bits and bridles gave riders more control. Iron stirrups gave them stability, allowing them to stand and strike. Entire tactics shifted. Now, a single cavalry charge, properly armed, could shatter an enemy line. And it all depended on iron, shaped in dark, smoky forges. Blood and balance. Iron made war easier and more deadly. Armies grew larger. Battles lasted longer. Weapons were more durable, more lethal, more accessible. But iron also brought resistance. For every iron sword, a shield was made. For every spear, a helmet. For every siege engine, a wall reinforced with iron spikes and braces. Iron didn't only take lives, it protected them. It helped maintain balance in a world always on the edge of chaos. The weight of a weapon. An iron sword is not light. It must be held, swung, sharpened, cleaned, carried across rivers and deserts. It drags on the hip. It leaves calluses on the hands. It rusts if neglected. It dulls if abused. It demands responsibility. The same was true for empires. Iron allowed them to expand, but it also forced them to carry the burden of conquest, because every sword drawn must be put away eventually. Every helmet dented must be repaired, and every victory comes with weight. Tonight, in the fog of battle, the fire is long gone. The forge is cold. You stand on a battlefield. Long after the fight is over, the fog clings low. The air is still. You see a sword stuck into the earth, its iron blade dark with rust and rain. Nearby, a broken chariot wheel lies in the mud. A helmet, half buried, rocks gently in the wind. No shouts, no banners, just silence. You walk through the aftermath. Iron everywhere, left behind by those who wielded it. Not all of them returned home. Some did, with scars and stories. The tools they carried, now silent, still hold memory. You pick up a piece. Cold, heavy. You set it down. Let it stay there. Let the ground keep the secrets. Let the iron rest. Let it rain. Not all history is written in ink. Some is written in soot, on the skin of men who worked beside fire. You will not find them in scrolls or marble statues. You won't see their faces on coins or in carvings. They didn't conquer nations or found dynasties, but without them, nothing would have lasted. This is the story of those who stood beside the anvil, who tamed fire, who coaxed strength from stone, who lived in the shadows, but built the tools of history. Tonight, we walk into the forge. We sit by the flames. We listen to the quiet lives of the blacksmiths. The forge, a place of smoke and skill. Blacksmith's world was not clean. It was not elegant. It was dark, hot, and loud. The forge was filled with tools, soot, and silence. Every item had a purpose. Every motion was deliberate. Anvils, tongs, bellows, water troughs, bars of iron stacked in corners, waiting for heat. Hammers of every shape, designed for force or finesse. The fire was alive. It breathed with the smith, rising when the bellows pumped, calming when the smith rested. In that space, time slowed. The rest of the world fell away. All that remained was iron, and the man shaping it, learning the craft. Apprentices and masters, no one became a blacksmith overnight. Boys, sometimes as young as 10, began as apprentices. They swept floors, pumped bellows, carried coal, watched closely, learned slowly. They spent years doing nothing but watching and waiting, learning the colors of hot iron, red, orange, yellow, white, learning the rhythm of the hammer, the way metal bends and resists. After years of sweat and silence, they became journeymen, allowed to forge under the master's eye, allowed to burn their fingers, to ruin pieces, to learn from mistakes. Only after more years of work could they become masters, able to open their own forge, take on apprentices, sign their work, if they ever chose to. But most did not sign. They knew the metal would speak louder than names, the sounds of a blacksmith's life. The forge was not quiet, but its sounds were gentle in their repetition. The rush of bellows feeding air to the fire, the crackle of coal as it caught flame, the ring of hammer on iron, not loud, but deep and solid. The hiss of water as glowing steel cooled. It was not chaos. It was rhythm. Outside the forge, the world might be filled with war, taxes, speeches, and noise. Inside, everything followed the logic of heat and effort. The smith worked alone or with one helper. They didn't talk much. There was no need. The fire spoke. The iron listened. Tools of peace and war. Blacksmiths made everything. A farmer's hoe, a baker's oven door, a locksmith's pick, a soldier's dagger. They made tools for birth and death, for home and battle, for kings and for beggars. Sometimes they made surgical tools, used to save lives. Other times they made shackles, used to end them. They didn't choose what their work became. They only made it well, and in that way, they were part of everything. And everyone, sacred hands, unseen faces. In many cultures, blacksmiths were feared or revered. They could turn raw rock into deadly weapons. They knew how to melt, mold, stretch, and sharpen. That knowledge seemed magical, even divine. In West Africa, blacksmiths were considered spiritual mediators. In India, the caste of smiths, Lohars, held sacred status. In Japan, swordsmiths followed ritual processes, working in near-religious silence. In Norse mythology, the gods themselves needed the dwarven smiths to make their most powerful tools. The blacksmith's hut was not just a workshop. It was a temple of transformation, where stone became strength, where metal became meaning, iron and identity. To be a blacksmith was not just to have a job. It was to have a calling. They didn't build things for glory. They built things to last. A tool must not break in the hand. A blade must not dull too quickly. A hinge must not groan in the wind. Every detail mattered, not for applause, but for survival. In some towns, the blacksmith was more respected than the mayor, because when the wall needed mending, the weapon fixing, or the storm shutter restoring, it was the blacksmith who answered, silently, efficiently, without pride. The forgotten builders. Historians remember names, kings, explorers, thinkers, but the blacksmith? He left no autobiography, only a world that stayed together longer because of him. Every iron nail still holding a beam, every buried horseshoe, every bent blade, every rusted key, all whispers of his labor. And though his name may be gone, his craft remains. Even now, when modern machines press and cut, the echoes of the hammer still linger. The world was once shaped by men who asked for nothing, except a hot fire and the space to work. Tonight, at the hearth, the rain is falling again. You hear it tapping gently outside the stone building. Inside, it's warm. You sit near the hearth. You smell iron, ash, and a little bit of sweat. A man, older now, gray at the temples, stands over the anvil. His shoulders are rounded, not by weakness, but by years of honest labor. He's not making anything special, just a simple hook for someone's door. But he works with care. The fire glows. The iron sings beneath the hammer. The walls flicker with light. You close your eyes, and in that sound, tap, 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 you hear the story of everyone. Whoever built something that lasted, let it calm you. Let it hold you. Let it carry you gently towards sleep. Let it rain. The clink of iron on stone. The hiss of steam from quenched steel. The quiet weight of a sword drawn at dawn. These are not the loud sounds of history. They are its heartbeat. While kings built statues and empires made proclamations, something quieter carried the real weight of civilization. Iron it was not glamorous. It was not precious. It did not glitter in temples or adorn the crowns of monarchs. But iron, strong, humble, reliable, became the framework upon which the greatest empires were built. Iron. The empire beneath the empire. Every great civilization needed soldiers, farmers, builders, and scribes. But behind each of them stood the blacksmith. They worked in the margins, in huts behind palaces, in workshops at the edge of towns, in villages that never made the maps. They forged swords for battle, plows for harvest, hinges for doors, and nails for timber. They made locks to guard treasures and keys to open them. They made tools to build and tools to destroy. And they did it all with iron. Their names were rarely remembered, but the things they made, those endured. Persia, roads paved with iron. The Achaemenid Empire stretched from the Aegean Sea to the Indus Valley, one of the largest empires the world had yet seen. Its success depended not just on soldiers or silver, but on infrastructure. Thousands of kilometers of royal roads crossed deserts, mountains, and rivers. These roads allowed messages, goods, and troops to move faster than ever before. But roads need tools. Wagons need wheels. Bridges need reinforcement. And every connection, every axle, hook, and hinge was held together by iron. Persian blacksmiths enabled this vast communication network. They didn't speak for the king, but they made it possible for the king to be heard. Rome, built with iron discipline. The Roman Empire became a master of engineering. Aqueducts, roads, fortresses, and public buildings. Iron made this possible. Roman soldiers marched in iron-soled sandals, wielded iron short swords, and slept beneath tents secured with iron pegs. Even their siege machines, carts, and armor were held together with iron bolts and brackets. Blacksmiths across the empire produced tools in massive quantities. Spades for digging trenches, tongs for building caltrops to stop enemy horses, chains to secure prisoners. No soldier went to war without a blacksmith's work in their hands, and no road was built without one behind the scenes. Forging in the shadows. China, masters of early ironworking. In ancient China, iron was not just a tool. It was a technology. As early as the 5th century BCE, Chinese foundries were producing cast iron using advanced bellows and blast furnaces. They poured molten iron into molds to create tools, cooking vessels, and weapons. They forged plowshares to till their vast farmlands, spades to irrigate them, and sickles to harvest them. Iron production wasn't limited to warfare. It powered a growing population, supported a bureaucracy, and equipped a massive standing army. By the Han Dynasty, China was exporting iron tools along the Silk Road, spreading silent strength across continents. India, the mystery of the pillar. Perhaps the most iconic symbol of ancient iron mastery, stands quietly in Delhi. The Iron Pillar of Delhi, over 1,600 years old, rises 7 meters into the sky, without a trace of rust. Made around the 4th century CE, it defies time and weather. Modern scientists still study it, trying to understand the perfect balance of materials and technique. Whoever made it was not just a blacksmith. They were a metallurgist, an engineer, and perhaps even a philosopher. And yet, we do not know their name. They left no inscription to boast of their genius. Only iron. Silent. Enduring. Africa. Spiritual iron. In many parts of sub-Saharan Africa, blacksmiths were not just laborers. They were spiritual figures. Among the Nok culture of Nigeria and the Yoruba people, ironworkers held a sacred status. They were believed to control fire, to transform the earth's flesh into human tools. In some regions, only blacksmiths could perform certain rituals or handle sacred objects. Their forges were places of power, part workshop, part shrine. To work with iron was to work with the very foundation of survival, invisible strength. Iron supported empires without demanding credit. IT held up temples, crossed rivers, secured cities, and broke enemy lines. And yet, history books often mention it only in passing, as if it were background noise, not the main stage. But in truth, iron was the structure. Everything else was decoration. The strength of empires wasn't measured in speeches or monuments. It was measured in rivets, sword edges, and plow blades, made by hands that history forgot. Tonight, in the heart of the empire, picture a rainy night in an ancient Roman town. The cobbled streets are slick with water. Oil lamps flicker behind shuttered windows. In the distance, you hear the slow rhythm of a hammer. You follow it. Down a narrow alley. Past barrels and carts. Past sleeping dogs and closed taverns. You find the forge. Inside, a man works, quietly, deliberately. His movements are practiced. His brow is streaked with ash. The forge glows orange that he is shaping. Something. A nail? A spear tip? A wheel rim? You don't know. He doesn't care. He simply works, because the empire needs iron. And tonight, it gets what it needs. Let the rhythm of his hammer carry you. Let the fire warm your thoughts. Let the sound of rain on the roof wash over you. Let the world fade. Let sleep rise. Let it rain. In the flickering shadows of ancient temples, in the soot-blackened corners of village forges, and in the hush before battle, iron waited that IT wasn't shiny like gold, or soft like copper, or melodic like bronze. It didn't ask for attention, but it earned it. The Iron Age had begun, not with fireworks, not with fanfare, but with function. And as the centuries passed, the world's most powerful civilizations began to build themselves, not on myth or marble, but on metal, quiet, black, hard-earned iron, the hidden edge. Why iron changed everything. Bronze had ruled the world. For thousands of years, it had been the elite's choice for swords, statues, chariot wheels, and royal seals. But bronze was expensive. Tin had to be imported. Often, it came from distant mountains or across the sea. If the trade routes broke, the bronze stopped flowing. Iron, on the other hand, was everywhere. You didn't need kings or caravans to get it. You needed patience, fire, charcoal, time. A furnace hot enough to persuade the rock to give up its secret that IT was the metal of the people. And it worked. Iron tools made better plows, which carved deeper furrows. Iron sickles harvested more grain, which fed more people. Iron nails built stronger homes, which stood longer against the wind. And when iron was made into weapons, it changed who could rule and how long they could hold power. The Hittites, first masters of iron. Historians often credit the Hittites, an ancient Anatolian people, as the first large-scale users of iron. Around 1500 BCE, in what is now Turkey, the Hittites began smelting and working iron with increasing regularity. Not just beads and curiosities, real tools, real weapons. They guarded their techniques closely. Iron was strategic knowledge, not for trade, but for war. Hittite swords and spearheads were stronger than what their enemies carried. Their ironwork gave them an edge, both literally and figuratively. But when the Hittite Empire collapsed around 1200 BCE, the iron secrets leaked to Phoenicians, Arameans, Assyrians, and beyond. And once the knowledge spread, it could never be contained again. Assyria, iron and empire of all the early adopters. The Assyrians mastered iron for war. By the 9th century BCE, the Assyrian army was among the most feared in the world. Their iron swords, iron-tipped arrows, and iron helmets outlasted their enemies' bronze. Iron enabled larger armies, more standardized equipment, and longer campaigns. The Assyrians weren't just conquerors, they were administrators. They built roads, cities, canals, many using iron tools. Their empire stretched from Egypt to Persia, and when you looked at a soldier from Nineveh or Ashur, you saw a glint, not of wealth, but of iron discipline. Everyday iron, tools of the ordinary. While kings waged wars and scribes wrote laws, blacksmiths quietly filled the ancient world with iron. Most of it didn't end up in museums. It was lost in fields, buried in ruins, or worn down to dust. But it was there, in homes, markets, and workshops. Plowshares dug through stubborn soil. Axes cleared land for farming. Hinges kept gates secure. Cauldrons cooked stews on open fires. Needles sewed cloth. Locks kept doors shut. Iron made life easier, stronger, longer lasting. and its presence was so quiet, people almost forgot it was special. Writing in iron even touched language in ancient India. Inscriptions were carved into iron pillars. Like the famous Iron Pillar of Delhi, which still stands after over 1,600 years without rusting away. In some cultures, the word for iron became a symbol of strength and endurance. In Hebrew, Barzel became synonymous with toughness. In Latin, ferrum, from which we get ferrous, was used in metaphors for strength. In Old Norse, jarn was associated with both metal and magical protection. Even today, in languages around the world, iron still shows up in our metaphors. Iron will, iron curtain pumping, ironclad promises, and material becomes a mindset, iron, and the body unknowingly. Ancient people also consumed iron, in water, in food, and through the tools they cooked with. They may not have understood hemoglobin or nutrition, but they knew something. People who used iron tools were often healthier, stronger, hardier. Some ancient medical texts even recommended drinking water left in iron vessels, believing it increased vitality. They were, in their own way, absolutely right. Iron didn't just shape the outer world. It became part of us. Silent power iron didn't call attention to itself. That it wasn't rare like gold. It wasn't bright like silver. It wasn't soft and shiny like copper. But it was there. Everywhere. In blades and bridges, in chisels and carts, in nails and needles, holding things together, making things last. And even when the people who made it were forgotten, the iron they left behind still whispered their story. A world of iron. By 500 BCE, the Iron Age had spread across Europe, Asia, and parts of Africa. Entire cultures were shaped around it. The Celts built iron weapons and intricate iron jewelry. The Chinese Zhou dynasty used iron plows and swords. The Kushites of Nubia forged iron for trade and defense. The Greeks and Romans elevated blacksmithing into high craft, from dusty deserts to green forests, from savannas to river valleys. Iron connected people, not through words, but through work. A world made stronger. Quietly, tonight, visit the ancient forge. Close your eyes. You are standing in a village 2,000 years ago. The streets are made of earth. The houses are of clay and stone. You hear a rhythmic tapping. Gentle, regular. It comes from a hut with smoke drifting lazily from its roof. Inside, a smith works by lamplight. He is not young. His hands are cracked and scarred. He turns a bar of glowing metal on an anvil. He breathes. He strikes. He shapes. He doesn't rush. Iron never hurries. The room smells of charcoal, sweat, and dust. Outside, rain begins to fall, a soft drizzle. You hear it on the thatch. It mixes with the sound of the hammer. A lullaby made of effort and time. You sit. The heat warms you. The rhythm calms you. The story of iron continues, not in books, but in sparks. And tonight, that story is yours. Let it cool your mind. Let it shape your dreams. Let it rain. Long before the clang of swords on shields. Long before railways shrieked across continents. Long before blood tests measured iron in your veins. There was just the sky, and the stars, and the occasional stone that fell from them. This is the story of iron. Not the loud, heroic version you may have heard. Not the epic of steel-forged empires or fire-born industries. But the quiet story of how iron slowly entered human life. How it waited patiently beneath our feet. And how, once awakened, it never left. Tonight, we return to the beginning. To a time before furnaces. Before anvils. Before smelting. To a time when the sky whispered its secrets through fallen stones. A strange stone from the sky. Imagine a vast desert. Silent. Unchanged for thousands of years. A hunter walks barefoot. The sun bakes the sand. His eyes scan for movement. Lizards, birds, maybe signs of water. And then, he sees it. A dark stone. Smooth, heavy, and unusual. It doesn't look like flint or obsidian. It's dull, but oddly metallic. He picks it up. It's heavier than it should be. Colder, too. He has just found meteoric iron, a fragment of a star, fallen to Earth. Before people could mine iron, before they could forge it, they discovered it like this, as a gift, lying in the sand. Metal before metallurgy. Long before the Iron Age, there was iron. But not the kind humans made. The kind the universe made. These pieces of meteoric iron were incredibly rare, scattered across the Earth. But they were distinct. They contained nickel, unlike terrestrial iron. They were strong and shiny when polished. And, most importantly, they didn't need to be smelted. You could shape them, grind them, and even sharpen them with time and care. And so, the first iron tools were not forged in fire. They were carved from stardust. In ancient Egypt, small iron beads have been found dating back over 5,000 years. These beads were rolled from meteoric metal and buried with the dead, likely considered sacred or royal. To these people, iron wasn't a resource. It was a sign from the gods. Bronze reigns, iron waits, while iron sparkled quietly in tombs and temples. The world was ruled by bronze. The Bronze Age was the age of early civilization. Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, Minoan Crete, Shang China, people made bronze from copper and tin, metals that were relatively easy to smelt with the technology of the time. Bronze was malleable, strong, and predictable. It could be melted, poured into molds, shaped into intricate forms. It gave rise to swords, armor, statues, coins, and chariots. It helped build empires. And iron? It waited, because unlike bronze, iron refused to melt. Its melting point was far higher, over 1,500 degrees Celsius, well beyond the reach of early fires and furnaces. Iron sat deep underground, locked in stone, until, eventually, someone figured it out. The accidental discovery. Picture a campfire. Nothing special. A few embers glowing. A curious stone tossed into the flame. Perhaps by accident, perhaps in boredom. The fire burns low overnight. Ash settles. The heat lingers. In the morning, someone sifts through the remains and sees something strange. A small lump of metal. Dense. Coherent. Not melted, but different. They touch it. Tap it. Hit it with a stone. It bends. Slightly. It holds. This is wrought iron. Not pure, but workable. Created by solid-state reduction, not melting. A process that uses charcoal to strip oxygen from iron ore, producing a spongy, malleable lump. It can't be poured. It must be hammered, beaten, folded, shaped, patiently, but it is strong. And once it takes an edge, it keeps it. The age of ironworking has begun, quietly, in a forgotten forge, under an open sky. The first blacksmith's blacksmithing was not born with glory. It began with trial and error, with frustration, with hours spent hammering uncooperative lumps of slag. But those who persisted discovered something special. Iron tools were stronger than bronze. They didn't snap under pressure. They bent, but didn't break. They held up to farming, chopping, digging, and building. Communities that used iron had an advantage, even if small at first, and those who made iron became important. The blacksmith was not just a laborer. He was a transformer, turning rocks into blades, stone into structure, heat into power. In many cultures, smiths became sacred figures. In African traditions, they were considered mediators between the spiritual and physical worlds. In Greek mythology, Hephaestus was the god of fire and forge, ugly in form, but divine in craft. In Norse lore, dwarves forged mighty weapons from iron deep underground. Iron was not just metal. It was mystery. From tool to weapon. At first, iron was used for simple tools, plowshares, sickles, nails, hooks, knives. But in time, it became clear iron could also make weapons, stronger swords, harder spear tips, reliable arrowheads. Early iron weapons weren't always better than bronze, but they were cheaper. Iron ore was everywhere, while tin, for bronze, was rare and expensive. And so, armies armed with iron could field more soldiers, more spears, more tools of war, even if each one was less ornate. Iron leveled the battlefield, and quietly, it began to reshape empires. The end of an age. Around 1200 BCE, something strange happened. Across the Mediterranean and Near East, civilizations collapsed. The Hittite Empire fell. The Mycenaeans vanished. Trade networks crumbled. Cities burned. Historians still debate why. Invasions, drought, earthquakes, all likely played a role. But amid the ruins, something new took root. Bronze faded. Iron remained. It could be sourced locally. It didn't require distant trade. And in a world recovering from chaos, that made all the difference. The Iron Age did not arrive with fanfare. It arrived in the silence after collapse, with a slow beat of hammers and the hiss of water cooling metal. Tonight, watch the fire you sit on a wooden stool. A forge glows nearby, not roaring, but steady. You hear the quiet breath of bellows, the soft rhythm of hammer on metal. Rain falls on the roof. Above, steady, gentle, like a lullaby from the sky. The blacksmith wipes sweat from his brow. The iron glows red, then orange, then white. He turns it, strikes it, shapes it, and you sit, warm, sleepy, watching history take form. The world is changing slowly, quietly, not with kings and banners, but with sparks and smoke. Let your eyes close. Let the hammer beat become a rhythm in your bones. Let the rain soften your thoughts. Let the fire carry your dreams. Let it iron you into sleep.